Welcome to the EarthWorks podcast, where our team will share the jargon of carbon from many of our turf friends from the past 30 years.
Hi, everybody. This is Joel Simmons and gang for the EarthWorks podcast. This is our end-of-year podcast, and we want to wish everybody a wonderful holiday, a very Merry Christmas, a Happy Hanukkah. What am I missing? Kwanzaa, all the things that you might be celebrating. We want to say thank you. We have now been doing this, guys, for 4 years? 3 years.
The podcast.
And we just went through some numbers. We just had our big EarthWorks Summit, and we went through a bunch of numbers. Thousands of views. Lots and lots of people have been subscribing. We're grateful for everybody that has been listening. Kevin and I were traveling in British Columbia this past week, and we were sitting down with a bunch of superintendents, and they're saying, "Oh, I know those voices. I know you guys." And it was kind of entertaining, but the podcast has done very well. But we wanted to just go around the horn. With us today is Kirk Kastner and Kevin Hicks and Jack Higgins and Joel Simmons, and we're going to just talk about what the hell we saw this year. Did we see anything good? Who wants to start?
Yes.
You start.
Yeah, a lot of construction out my way for sure.
Yeah, that's been good. Yeah. We've been doing construction. I mean, this has been one of our biggest pieces of business, and it's funny because again, we try not to make this a commercial, but we built this product, Renovate Plus, from the requests of superintendents saying they're giving me straight sand. Can you do anything? Yeah. So what we wanted to do was mimic a soil and a soilless medium, and so that's what we did. We put together a mineral package, an organic package, and we've got zeolite in this product so that it has a water holding capacity and a CEC. So, but man, we've done a lot of construction. I mean, I think everybody on this panel has done some construction this year, either reconstruction or construction. But you did Olympic Club. Who else did you do? We're doing Sharon Heights.
Sharon Heights. Probably one of the neatest ones for me to be a part of is a golf course in central Idaho in the mountains that had sat fallow for 7 years.
Oh, that's cool.
And new money came in, but the neatest thing for me was they fast-tracked the construction on the first 8 holes, didn't have time to get the amendments in the ground. The second 11, I think there's 11 holes, I think there were 19 total, but the second 11, they got all of the recommended amendments down before they seeded, and within 8 weeks, those greens were ahead of the previous ones that were seeded the year prior.
Wow.
So a pretty considerable, good case study for us.
Yeah, you're saying that soil amendments make a difference when it comes to establishment?
At least in that one case.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. Just the one thing.
Yeah,
Okay. That's
exactly.
the only one, maybe. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, it's been really, really good. I think, Kirk, you've had a couple as well in the Texas market, right?
Yeah. Texas is building about 8 golf courses right now,
Wow.
which is incredible.
That might account for most of them around the country,
Right?
really.
Yeah, it's pretty incredible.
Well, you and I have been working on a group in Florida down,
Yeah, they're
Tiger
building.
Woods
They're
is building his
building another handful of new construction golf courses in Florida.
Can this industry support this? Are we going to get it 5 years down the road and find closings?
You
like
probably
we were 10 years ago or 20
yeah,
years?
you guys have all heard my question for the last 2 years is with this boom that we've seen since COVID. I mean, golf has been a great beneficiary of shifting people's time around. And my question has always been, is the industry smart enough to capitalize and maintain this momentum? And unfortunately, most of the time the answer is no.
Yeah, a lot of people say no, but I
disagree.
Yeah, I disagree.
Yeah.
I see the rounds in a lot of areas staying up.
Or you try to get a tee time at the local muni, and it's
you can't do
No,
it.
I don't.
do it.
I don't disagree with that. I'm thinking more long term. But the other thing that has been a little disappointing for me as a former superintendent is that we had a great opportunity to really kind of retool and look at the game differently. We took all the accessories off the golf course for a couple of years.
That was fun.
We pulled all the rakes out of the bunkers. We really and in a lot of cases shut down or severely limited the service from the restaurants.
Yeah.
And yet golf was up considerably in that time.
And profits
as soon as the light goes green again, we plug all those expenses and all those things back in instead of saying, gosh, did we really need that? Did we? Yeah, maybe not the restaurants, but some of the accessories and all the things that cost money. that don't give us anything in return. So that was disappointing to see, because I'd been hopeful, as a lot of superintendents were, that maybe we could kind of leave some of that stuff in the barn for good, but it hasn't worked out
But
that way.
a lot of courses are saying that they're getting new members. Their memberships
Absolutely.
are filled.
Yep.
Their waiting lists are back. They didn't have those 5 years ago.
And that's why a lot of construction's happening.
And
They're
construction-
reinvesting.
And also rates went up too.
Right.
There's a lot of daily fee places that increase their rates 15-20% and still get the rounds, you know, and
Well, their costs have gone significantly
sure,
up. Yeah.
sure.
Labor,
So everything's
inputs,
reflected.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
I've been advocating that for years. It's like, all you have to do is raise, double your prices. You'll get half the people off the golf course, and maintenance will become a little less damaging. And
Something to be said for that.
Maybe there's something in there. I don't know.
We're trying to grow the game here.
Right. Oh, that's
Remember,
right. That's right.
yeah.
It's funny. We just saw some surveys, and it actually didn't sound as positive as we think it is. And and the first reaction we had was that no, that can't be true. That golf is flat and going down, because it certainly doesn't feel like it is.
No, I agree. I mean, there's
I think that was
there's a new golf course construction on Long Island as well, and that's
Wow.
you can't get a much more of a tighter market than
New
that.
new
and
construction.
some
New
expensive
construction.
real estate.
Yeah, there you go. Discovery
kidding.
Golf project out there. So, what were some other... Well, the other interesting thing that came out, and we've spent a lot of time so far talking about golf, but really a lot of our annual recap this week was about non-golf and,
Right.
and how that sector is really taking off.
Yeah.
And that's been a lot of fun for us, I think.
Yeah.
Like, it's been really eye-opening, and it's rewarding, too.
Yeah.
Let's talk about, you and I went to the British Columbia Superintendents Association. I spoke, and I did a talk on biological soil management, and then there was like 3 other talks that may or may not have contradicted what I had said. And we, the one question I had for you as we were pulling out of it is like, man, these poor guys have got to be confused, because I say one thing, and I gave a talk on biological soil management, and I think the one comment that I really made that I believe very strongly is there wasn't a superintendent in that room, and there was over 200 that didn't have something in their shop that was carbon-based, or I hate to use the word organic, but the carbon model has really come to fruition. I mean, Jerry Bernetti and I started this back in 1988, and we were called every name in the book. But now it certainly feels like people are starting to understand the value. And what we were talking about and today is like, look at places like Florida, where the sand, where the soils are all sand and they're sand capped, and they need this stuff. But we go to this meeting and I give this talk, and I basically prefaced it all by saying, this is what we've done for 35 years, is we've built biological soil management profiles, and talked about a whole lot of experiences. You and I did an academy the day before up in Seattle, and had a nice roundtable conversation about this with guys. And then you get these guys, the one thing that really pisses me off, the one comment, and I'll not mention any names, but that when they were talking about black layer, well, black layer is caused by sulfur. I think it's caused by water, isn't it, or lack of air? I think sulfur might be secondary, but but when you think about that, if you hear a statement like that, and then you hear, and then you realize, well, then I just won't put anything with sulfur in it down, and I'll never have black layer. Of course, that doesn't stop black layer. Right. And then you hear people tell you that, paste extracts don't work, they don't do anything. We live and die by paste extracts. I mean, they tell us bicarbonates, they tell us sodium, they tell us sodium-potassium ratios. I mean, we all do hundreds, thousands of paste extracts. So stop me anywhere along the line.
No, and in high sand content soils like putting greens and bowling greens and sports turf fields,
Soccer fields.
That's really a
It's the
good
most
test to
useful
look
data.
at things.
How do you know that your sulfur's way up? If you're not looking at if you're not looking at it on a
That's
test.
part of the tool, is it can show you the blind spots.
Right.
Right.
I was just running a battery, and there was one green. All the greens were very much the same, except there was one green where sulfur was 3 times of everything else, as was potassium and as was sodium. So the first thing was like, okay, all these super soluble nutrients are way higher on this one site. What's the internal drainage issue here? Because other than that, there's not much to glean off of these soil tests. But Green 6 has got something going on, So
And it's fun to see the reaction of the turf manager
when it hits them.
Well, not only that, but you may not have even been on that golf course,
Right? No,
and you'll say, "Hey, what's going on with number 6?" And they
How'd you know this was a problem child?
But that just shows that data is very valuable.
Yeah, right.
Yep.
I remember talking to a superintendent about a year and a half ago. We were going through some soil tests, and he had come up through a management company's philosophical training, I guess, and they only looked at a standard soil test. And we walked through the paste extract because he said, I'm not real comfortable with interpreting this data. And there was a long pause, and he said, I've been building my fertility program off the standard soil test, and I should have been using this. I said, yeah, it's certainly a lot more applicable to the day-to-day input requirements, for sure.
Yeah, I mean, it's a running joke in the office. I mean, you get a standard soil test, and you look at this and say, do we have a paste on this thing? Because you see something there that, you ask the question like, wow, is that a problem right there? I mean, the analogy that, I think you gave it to me, or maybe I stole it from Paul Scoffus, but the standard test.
Me.
Of course I did. But I didn't steal that shirt.
Okay.
Your uncle gave you
stole that
shirt?
from his uncle.
So the analogy is that the standard soil test is your freezer, and the paste extract is the refrigerator. It's something that's available, and you could have lots of stuff in the freezer, but is it available? And yes, none of these tests are 100% accurate,
right.
But they're good guidelines, and they give us ideas. The paste extract is between a standard and a tissue test, which we're not big fans of as a team. But it gives us some really good ideas as to mobility, and if nothing more than sodium and bicarbonate are what you get out of it, to me, that's the biggest limiting factor.
The analogy I use that seems to really resonate is the standard soil test is your 401k.
There you go.
Right, and the paste extract is more about what's in your wallet. They're both really important,
right?
Because down the line we're going to need what's in our 401k, but you're not going
to the end of that.
Well, no, but you're not gonna be able to access that for a number of years.
And you're talking to 2 young guys, and they don't ever carry cash.
I know,
Yeah.
but hopefully they're investing in their 401k and looking at a standard soil test now and again.
It's always, Dad, do you have any cash? Do you have any cash, Dad? Yeah, great, thanks so much. Yeah, no, it's an important tool, and we met with Susan Shaner from Logan Labs this week, and she was talking about the growth of that business, and and we've been doing tests for all these years. I think we do about 15,000 soil tests a year between the 4 of us, and that's a lot of data that we're looking at. And my favorite is when I'm working with a client and we can actually do a paste extract once a month on 1 or 2 sites, a monitoring program, and man, the guys get off on that because they can see month to month what's rising, what's lowering, what's falling out, what's building up. And it just
it's done for you. There are historical trends that are in the database.
Yeah.
It's there for you. It's so easy to use.
I mean, you guys, we've all done this. I mean, you walk in, you guys got, hey, do you have any soils? Yeah, we did some 3 or 4 years ago. Like, where are they? In a drawer somewhere? And like, that's not helping us at all. But the data that we gather from this is so important. And and we talked about this week, and Lisa Kiefer at our office says this all the time. We built our business, which has exploded in the last number of years, on soil testing, and we'll continue that trend because it gives us a starting point and it helps us manage the core stuff. So
the other thing I talk about a lot with respect to you ask a superintendent if he's got soil tests, and he'll open up the binder and there's 5 different labs,
right? Exactly.
Where every testing protocol and every extraction method is totally different. It really is confusing at that point because you don't know, you can't compare apples to apples or apples to oranges. So, one of the things I've always tried to preach to assistants when I was a superintendent or now to clients is, be consistent with the lab, whether it's ours or whether it's someone else's. Stick with it, know how to read them, know how to interpret them, because it's no different than walking into a doctor's office and him looking at you and writing a prescription without any blood work or without any testing done, right?
Because it came up in conversation this week, and we've fallen into talking about soil tests. Let's
just ride it.
We're here.
Let's just keep
This
going.
is just the soil testing section.
Okay, so
welcome to the soil testing podcast.
You told a great story to me about Santa Rosa Country Club, but and like the extreme magnesium that they were dealing with there. But Was it Claremont that also dealt with something, or there was a nearby club that also dealt with a very
Well, Claremont was one of Joel's clients for a long time. And,
Right.
And what happened there was he had invested, and it was starting to pay off.
right. So
big
those
time.
were those were like two situations with a similar imbalance of calcium and magnesium.
Yeah, I'm not sure you would know, Joel, if Claremont was like that.
Claremont was high in magnesium,
Yeah.
low in calcium. So he had been a base saturation guy his whole career. So
Right.
he got it even before I started working with him. We brought the carbon piece to the table,
Sure.
and it really made some changes. But it's when you got magnesium, I mean, I think his levels were in the 40s.
Right.
When you get magnesium that high, it takes a long time to get that thing to loosen up and flocculate.
Right. Not most of the listeners are accustomed to the extremes that
Right.
were that you see in some places.
Yeah.
Now, this is a story about an
In the West.
extreme in the West. Yeah, you see more extremes of this, but I mean, it applies to everybody. It applies to. It doesn't have to be an extreme situation for you to see the benefit of getting that calcium to magnesium ratio right. You had said that there's courses in this area that they have a
Well,
mud
that's at
season.
Santa Rosa.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
so
It's the
tell us-
crazy. So Fernando, the superintendent, and I were riding around the golf course, and I said, "Wait a minute, what is this little sidewalk that leads to the center of the beginning of the fairway?" And he said, "In the wintertime, when the winter rains start, because there's such an imbalance in the soil, the ground is unwalkable, certainly undrivable. They stop mowing in November and don't mow again until sometimes April."
Wow.
because it's just a
Holy
mudslide. The whole
Because
thing is just
you would just sink to your ankles.
Yeah.
And so they built these little sidewalks with a hitting mat, and every hole is a par 3 during the wintertime.
wow,
Because
wow.
that's all they can do.
wow, yeah. So,
It's really interesting.
but however, like there is a way forward through that, you know, and a lot of it is building soil, build soil health. So, but the first thing is balance the chemistry, right?
Yep.
So like
Heard that somewhere.
balance the chemistry and feed the soil will ultimately create a stronger organic horizon that will allow for water to infiltrate and that moisture to be utilized and roots to pass through and build some structure to that whole thing so that you can walk across it.
Joel's told this story about clients in Northern California, but we have one down in Southern Cal that had done a major renovation on his golf course, and in moving soils around and reshaping bunkers, he had exposed some subsoil around some of the bunkers,
Okay.
and it was a very, very tight, high magnesium soil, and we just addressed with high cal lime, cheapest input you can find,
That we don't sell, by the way.
and
Just in case anybody's
that's
noticed.
right.
and in a year's time, he was actually getting infiltration into the soil again,
Yes.
and rooting and everything else. So
Yes. So like, just to keep reiterating, I know it sounds like a broken record, but like these balances, particularly with the calcium magnesium, make a big difference.
and how do you know unless you test for it?
There you go.
And everybody,
In soil.
yeah,
Right.
and everybody
Yeah,
in
in
this
native
room has
soil.
done this.
in native
Yeah.
high CEC soil.
Yeah, it's all high CEC, and this is the big argument, and it still drives me nuts that we've been having this argument for, as long as I've been in the industry. Oh, that's hocus pocus, and we get on on the bullshit stations and all that kind of stuff, and we've been doing it forever, ever and ever.
Well, there's a lot of people that could go through their whole career and not find themselves in a
course.
situation like that. So, like, you could see how, like, some people will be like, well, I've done this for 40 years. I've never seen anything like that. Well, you haven't been
You hadn't
everywhere.
had 40% magnesium in your soil.
Right, and that
Yeah.
doesn't show up everywhere. But there's a lot of people that don't have 40% magnesium in their soil, but have irrigation water
Yeah.
of 1,000 parts per million salt concentration.
Right.
That now you're dealing with a whole nother thing that again you only identify with the right analysis.
Right.
Back
to the theme.
Yeah, but back to that theme, like that.
That alone can deflocculate it.
Yeah,
Right.
totally,
Right.
totally.
Sodium can be one of the worst deflocculators. It can really damage the soil. But yeah,
Well, and like Dave Wilbur said, there is no larger input into our soil systems than water,
yeah, and that's very true.
especially where Kirk and I are.
Yeah. I mean, here on the East Coast where we're recording, there's a big belt of high magnesium that rolls across central Pennsylvania, and then it goes down into the Shenandoah Valley.
Yeah, it comes off the Piedmont of the
You and I
Appalachians.
played golf at Evergreen a couple of weeks ago,
Yep.
and when I first started working on that, it was 40% magnesium, and no, that's just too much lime. I can't, And then I kind of lost track and came back, and he started putting down lime. He goes, man, I can't believe the changes that this made.
Mm-hmm.
And how many times do we hear, oh, if you don't like your soil, just move. You can't change your soil. We're not changing soil. We're managing soil.
That's
and
right.
it works every single time if you let the data work. It doesn't work on low CEC soils, but high mag soil, you can use lime, and those high mag soils are going to have high pHs because the magnesium is driving that.
That's where you
pH
really
high.
have to take the leap of faith.
Yeah, so you can imagine. I mean, I remember, I tell this story at all the academies, how many times I went in and said, hey, Mr. Superintendent, you got a high pH. I recommend a lot of limestone. And I got kicked out of offices left and right, and boots put in my pants, and I would try to say, look, just give me one fairway. Just let's do one fairway. And in 6, 7, 8 months, the pH from 7.3 or 7.4 is now 6.8 with limestone. Oh my God, that's impossible. That's bullshit. That's this and that. But we've done it 1,000 times. I've done it 1,000 times. You guys have done it hundreds of times in shorter careers. But it works on those types of soil every single time. I show a picture at the academy where I have I pulled a picture, a profile of soil out of the probe, and it was this long tubular thing, and I'm just playing with it, and it's all clay. 5 years later from that, I can't do that. I go in there and it just crumbles out of my probe. It's dark, rich, organic laced, and it crumbles because we've changed it.
That brings me something that Susan brought up that I got super excited about, and actually Kevin brought it up with your other role. You could tell us about that, the soil conservation stuff. Anyway,
He's an elected official.
That's right.
But we're talking about carbon sequestration,
Yeah.
and measuring that at
Right.
the lab, and this is like a call to action for everybody. Let's be a part of the cutting edge of this, because I think we're all in the process of writing what that normal is. The government wants to pay people money to sequester carbon, right? That's the gist of it.
Well, and the advantage, we have to get our heads around it, but the advantage in listening to some of the folks from the USDA and some of the researchers and universities at these soil conservation meetings, the key to it is to have a permanent cover crop.
Mm-hmm.
We fit perfectly into that.
Who does that?
Right.
We
Oh,
fit
that's right, we
perfectly
do.
into that.
Because a
Now-
permanent cover crop builds topsoil.
Yeah, now
does exactly what we're talking
It's
about.
more
carbon
beneficial
out of
if you
it's
have
not
more
exposed.
diverse species in that cover crop. However, we're covering soil, which is why we all know in the turf industry that turf is not only one of the best cover crops, but it's also a very effective filter.
Oh yeah.
And soil stabilizer.
And we do a lot of Heinz 57 out here. I
Right.
don't know. I mean, like we've got
No,
a
you're
lot
right. Yeah.
of multiple species in a turf stand.
Yep.
But multiple species of grass. So I think
Right.
what the
Right.
agriculture
I know
community is
we're
talking
not
about
doing
is
clover and
yeah,
stuff
I
like
mean
that.
talking
but-
about truly diversified. But but the point is, it's still a cover crop.
Right.
You know, and it's still
We're still
I mean,
stabilizing the
You know, I mean, it's still doing your favorite thing and photosynthesizing.
Yeah,
you know,
sequestering.
and sequestering. And like you said, the government is spending billions of dollars
Yeah.
because this is how we're going to kind of slow down the loss of carbon in the atmosphere. The plants will take it in and put it into the soil,
Right.
and they'll build humus.
We're a small piece of the puzzle, and there's an area just south of where I live in Idaho called the Palouse, and it's an alluvial, glacial sort of a geology with very steep rolling hills, and they farm a lot of wheat, and those fields will sit completely bare all winter, and the rains come, and you watch all that stuff, and that's the point, is to try to get that captured and keep it on the farm.
Yeah.
Right.
But we're already doing that.
Yeah.
So we have
Yeah.
to figure out how we can capitalize on that, and
Well, and also
Be a player.
seemingly how we can document it,
Right.
so that we can report it and maybe catch credit for it.
And this is one of the conversations that we've been having is that, and you asked the question of a couple of the experts, how do you measure carbon? And nobody has an answer.
Right.
And we talked to Susan Chaner, and we can do total carbon, but what does it mean? I mean, what does it really mean?
Right.
And I think, and maybe we don't even need to know, but as long as we're just tracking the data and showing
Right.
that we're increasing, you know, and maybe.
So on your soil tests, what you're going to see is organic matter. You're going to see an OM number on the top of your soil test page, and it's going to tell you theoretically how much humus is in that soil. And typically the golf course doesn't have a lot. Certainly the sand greens or the sand capped areas don't have a lot of OM. I mean, we've all seen brand new construction where OM is 0.1%. Ridiculously low. And on the other side of that, I've seen some where the OM can be very, very high. And it's not necessarily good on that end either. The question always goes back to, is this good organic matter or is it bad? One of my favorite stories is a client who will remain nameless, but he invested in his property. He built this beautiful profile of humus,
right?
And the guy came in behind him after he left and tore it all out because you see this layer of organic matter, and it scares the average guy. And I get it. I would be scared too if I didn't understand what it was. But if you feel
I don't get it. Yeah.
But because you're here and you've been there. But I mean, think about it. If you just go in and you see this profile and you see this 4 inches of organic matter, and you hear all these talks like we heard this week at this seminar. Well, organic bad. We got to measure the first inch, the second inch, the third inch of that. It's like, why? Just let biology digest it and just create the environment. Balance the chemistry, feed the soil.
Right.
That's the backbone of biological soil management. And all of that lignous material will digest into humus that becomes a reservoir for nutrients and for water and a home for microbiology to continually digest these lignous root systems. But there's still this controversy.
And also greatly increases playability too.
Yeah.
Let's tie it into something that matters for the golf game. Like if you don't have that structure there, then you just have sand splatter or thatch splatter.
Yeah,
both
of which are horrible.
Either one. Like so you want to get
that's
that
a really
structure.
good point. We had a guy at the seminar that asked that question, and I wish I had brought it up because that's such an important point. When you have humus and you're doing the due diligence of top dressing, I mean, I show that one picture. I think it was Pete Wentz property down at Kinloch, but it was 4 or 5 inches, and you could see the roots at the bottom of the profiler. But that is a very firm playing surface, and man, it takes a shot. It doesn't get beat up. Like you said, you got
it plays fantastic.
Yeah, exactly.
You reduce your inputs.
Yeah.
Less water, less
Right.
fertilizer.
The name Dan Dinelli came up in that conversation, and in the Chicagoland area, and he's done some really cool work with low cultivation, high carbon inputs, and he's got a great playing surface on fairways, on greens, but it's really counterintuitive to what the industry has kind of talked about for a long time.
Right.
Besides
And there's
the guys at the table here.
outside of the golf industry, there's no turf industry that gets afraid of increasing organic matter. Like there's no other turf industry, no other sector in the turf industry where I have to kind of bite my tongue as I try and encourage people to increase organic matter. But in golf, I have to qualify all the time. I don't mean this is what I mean.
But think about it. I mean, the model that we grew up on, and you and I certainly grew up on, was put down lots and lots of synthetic nitrogen.
Right.
And what does synthetic nitrogen do? I mean, not that it's a bad thing because we use it in every program, but it grows great crop of thatch.
Yep.
So the conversation had to be around managing the organic matter. But what's changed is the inputs are changing. Now we're going to more carbon-based. Everybody's talking about carbon. The Andersons have carbon. There's not a liquid manufacturer in the country that doesn't have something carbon in their program. Most of the manufacturers that are manufacturing fertilizers are dealing with some base of carbon. And the reason they're doing that is because it allows everybody to reduce the inputs. But as you're reducing, and we saw that on the survey today, reducing, GCSAA did a survey. How much the nitrogen levels are being
Continues to
reduced.
fall.
And what's happening is that thatch is being reduced as well. And when you throw in some carbon inputs, you start the biological digestion. That conversation doesn't have to happen anymore, at least not to any great extent, because we're not pounding 10 pounds of nitrogen a year on a little golf course green and growing this beautiful crop of thatch.
Same thing with our growing program. Same concept. Trying to balance.
And that's really where it's most
synthetics
important.
and the carbon inputs.
I mean, that's where it's the worst.
Yeah.
You grow in at
You
10
grow in
pounds
layer,
and you get this. and then the construction people, they leave, and the superintendent's got a nice layer of thatch.
Yeah.
I did have an interesting conversation with a prospective lawn care company recently, last week, and
That's recent.
yeah, and it was about it was a real sales cycle sort of conversation. There was some discovery, there was a lot of roadblocks in the conversation, and it
How'd
was
you handle the objections?
yeah, had to handle some objections and pivot.
Sales
But
101.
it started with like, I have no pain points, and I've got this whole thing figured out. Like, and really no one else does. Like, but I do have it figured out. Okay.
And I have no pain.
Yeah, and it was like, I have no pain.
I have no
points.
customers.
No, so this is the way the conversation started. It kept going, and it came to, and a lot of it was I use commodity synthetic fertilizer, and I'm using murate. I mean, I'm using commodity stuff, urea and murate. A lot of salt, lot of salt,
And no pain.
So he's like,
Currently.
really, I guess the only pain that I could have, but is that I really suffer a lot. My customers get a lot of disease. I was like, okay,
Really?
and
Why?
and this guy did not come up through the turf industry. He came up through the business side. Like he's an entrepreneur that saw the lawn care business as a giant opportunity, and so more of like the engineering a non-living system was his background. And I'm like, you're dealing with a living system,
A dynamic
and
system.
when you have a living system and you pump it with salt, it needs to bring in a lot of water to handle all that salt, to all that salt concentration. It needs to find homeostasis in the plant, and bringing in all that water. And here in New Jersey, in the summertime, with all that
protein,
salt and all that water coming in the
95
summer,
degree weather.
you will get disease. I mean, guaranteed, it's gonna happen. And
you had no pain.
at first it was no pain, right? So, but I think he's really thinking about it now. I think he's really thinking, and that's
So he's cursing you because you brought pain to his table. Thanks, Jack. Get
well.
out.
Well, we talk. I mean, it's the difference between.
But connecting the dots.
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
Like,
exactly.
I mean, that's
Yeah, it's what it is. And so not only does a lot of synthetic fertility grow a great crop of thatch, it can grow a great crop of brown patch
And disease.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Right.
exactly.
So
exactly.
and this is not just kind of scare tactics from the organic fertilizer guy. This is just straight. This is just regular
Basic
agronomy.
agronomy, yeah.
And also it's human health. It's basic biology.
Yeah.
It's any kind of biological system.
Yeah,
I've seen that out my way with microdochium, especially west of the Cascade Range, is the number one pathogen, probably the number 1, 2, and 3 pathogen.
Okay, got
They
it.
very
deal
great
with.
case study on that.
Yeah,
Right, on
and
teas.
we started some work on approaches and teas, and I just asked off the cuff, are you seeing any less pink
Microdochium,
snowball?
yeah.
And he said, I don't know. I'll call you right back. And he went running out and he sent me a whole bunch of pictures, and there was a very defined line as to where he was stopping that application, and there was very little pressure.
Yeah.
Was it fertility? No.
Right.
Biology.
Right.
Right?
Yeah, that's really cool. There's a lot that we can define that we kind of glance over or we forget about because like we've gotten so accustomed to doing biological soil
Well, and the same
management.
thing is with human health. I mean, the guys that, I had a friend in college that he swore he never ate anything green in his life. And we'd always challenge him. Well, never had that. All he would eat is pizza. Until one day we found he ate a meatball sub. I'm like, that's not pizza. But it's close enough. But that's all he ever ate. He died at 32 years old.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, it was horrible.
Yeah.
I mean, he was very heavy. He wasn't healthy at all. He was never healthy.
Yeah.
But I mean, it's the same analogy. I mean, murate of potash and urea, and this is a good idea as the exclusive
Repeat
diet.
rounds.
I'm just
Repeat
thinking
rounds.
of you pounding the arugula last night out of the martini glass.
You're right.
You
You
got
gotta
a
get
couple
your
years
roughage.
on you there.
You gotta get your roughage.
a martini
Oh
glass.
my God. Well, it wasn't. You could drink Guinness out of a martini glass. I guess, yeah.
Did you?
No.
No.
but,
Okay, good. That's good.
Oh man.
You know, let's talk about the lawn care industry because we were talking a lot about that today, and you know, it's interesting that industry. And I know a lot of our audience is really golf, but the analogies are really important because it's still grass. But these guys, you know, are business people, and it's a different conversation that we're having. And they, you know, and what we've been advocating is to change the business model, get away from this a la carte program that encourages over application, and it forces them to put trucks on the road constantly. And you know, you and I talked about a couple clients that we have, 2 or 3 actually, and they're growing, that are starting to realize that, man, I can change the business model. I can charge a flat fee. I can now be encouraged to reduce inputs, and all that's doing is putting money in my pocket.
Yeah.
Or grow dynamically. I mean, there's a huge demand from homeowners.
Yeah.
They want this in their home lawns. You can still do your traditional program,
And they will.
but have more offerings.
Yeah.
Grow the program that way, and the demand is there from the homeowner.
Yeah.
It's built in, and not only that, you can charge a premium for it.
You know,
it's a premium service.
Yeah, and it's exactly,
people
it's a
will
value
pay for
added.
it.
You know, and the nice thing is that they can also, you know, even, you know, and I'm gonna sound a little self-serving here, but even one application of something like an A22 in a round of 4 or 5 applications, and you can do it in the winter. I mean, we talk about this on the podcast all the time. The best application is the winter feeds, and same thing's happening on a golf course. One application on a fairway a year makes everything that you do work better. And in the lawn care world, man, it makes everything, because they're going to still come in, and you know, that first round will always be a pre-emergent, and that's necessity in that business, but it's going to make it work better because now the system is going. You know, and you know, I did a series of carbon myths on the Turf Talks recently, and one of my favorites is, this doesn't work until June when it all warms up, and I'm like, that's the stupidest thing I've ever heard. I mean, if it didn't work, none of us would be sitting here, and I would have been out of business 36 and a half years ago.
Right.
Because nobody would have done that again. But that's what happens when the system is warming up and biology is working. You know?
Yeah, you can really turn some heads in the lawn care industry too by taking this approach, because you'll maintain a green lawn much later into dormancy, you know, and come out much earlier. So it's very it's very impressive too.
Or a fairway, you know.
Yeah,
and
yeah.
look, you know, you and I spent some time down on Hilton Head. Same thing we're seeing down there. The guys that have been working with us, their zoysia is not dormant. You know, we were there 3 weeks ago or so,
Right.
and there was a lot of grass that wasn't dormant. It was beautiful.
Yeah, there was Bermuda and not dormant.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I like when you get to do that in areas where there's several golf courses off the road. Like there's a lot of pockets where there's a couple golf courses in the neighborhood, right? So you're working with the one guy, and it's like, wow. Especially in the late season and early season, you see that difference.
Well, and there's areas out my way in the mountains that it's really imperative to get that fall app down, because things just don't get rolling in the spring. You know, the season's open and things just aren't rolling yet, and so they've already kind of preloaded that system.
Well, that was the talk of the town on the east half of the country this year as well. And now that fall app, was that also the microdochium preventer, or
No, not
was
necessarily.
That,
Not
okay.
necessarily.
That was
It's
more
just
just an
in
annual
season.
program sort of.
Yeah.
It was the small and frequent in season, right? Is that kind of what we were doing?
No, I'm talking more a traditional dormant app.
Right.
Has become a lot more prevalent.
Well, it makes a big. But that's a great point, because you're right. Like the springtime, having a cool spring can really set you back for the whole year. You know, so if you can't get the plant up and going early, you know, especially if your rounds are way the heck up, then you're not recovering.
Right.
You know, you can't get any divot recovery, ball mark recovery, the whole thing.
And I think that's something too that I've turned a lot of light bulbs on in the last couple of years. We've seen, you know, in some areas of the country, 20-30% increase in rounds. Revenue's gone up, but a lot of people haven't really considered their inputs in that time. You know, if you're putting 30% more wear across a surface, you probably need to account for that. And once we kind of get that in their heads, they're seeing a lot more success. I mean, I've seen a surprising and somewhat unbelievable recurrence of dollar spot again, and silvery thread moss as well, because I think we've backed off some of our inputs, and you know, we had that stuff handled.
Well, even if you didn't back off and you get 30% more input,
you've backed off.
You're backed off, in percentage, in relative terms.
Absolutely.
Right, right. So, I mean, that's hard to, quantify sometimes.
Right,
Because, you just don't even think of it. But, yeah.
And to Kirk's point earlier, that's where the T program has really helped, because, again, they're just getting clobbered with play.
Yep.
Divots are terrible, so by going in and building a base of carbon inputs, they can do whatever they've normally done, but to have that base there just makes everything functional.
And we've seen a lot of guys just take something as simple as C3 and throw it in the tank every couple weeks.
Right.
And just do it on with everything else that might be in the tank, throw a little carbon load in there, and it just keeps the system flying. I mean, we built that whole liquid line to supplement the volume that we put down in the granular, but that's important because you get a little piece every single time, and you just keep the bugs happy, and they keep moving along the track.
I'll throw out another idea that I see as a trend throughout all the sectors of turf right now. So lawn care, sports, and golf, and it also ties in very well to EarthWorks, is that I see a lot more managers spot treating areas or isolating down the areas that take, like, landing zones that take the extreme abuse. So landing zones on fairways, of course, all your cart path and walk on, walk offs. But in sports, the field centers and goal mouths, and sidelines, and in lawn care, I see some sharp lawn care companies talking about the high use areas of the lawn, whether it's from dogs or kids or just the high use areas, and really spot treating those areas to get some more consistency across the whole property. And I do know that EarthWorks ties in really well to this, because products like Renovate Plus, Ecolite, 545, C3, like taking the extra tank, the afternoon tank out and hitting the certain areas, because A, you can't really overdo it. B, you're not going to stripe up the place. And C, it's all about soil health. It's all about managing that stress, and really, a lot of what we do is establishment, a starter. A lot of what we do is
biological.
Biological starter.
Correct.
So, and that's kind of what we're talking about here.
What's interesting, we had the guys in there were doing the drones work, and they had the ultraviolet lights, and you
what do they call that? NDVI?
Yeah, is that the name of it? Something like that. I mean, it's on the podcast. Go watch it. So it's getting late.
It's not quite an infrared, but it's something like that.
Something like that. But you could, they were showing us pictures of and you could see where the biological stuff was put down. You could see where the 545, and the examples he was showing me were, guys were using it on approaches, and you could see it come up the fairways where nothing had been put in, and then there's this really dark, really glowing section where the approach starts, and they had been putting down 545 and or Renovate. I'm not even sure what it is, but it was so striking to me when you can see, obviously what we're doing is we're generating biological activity, which is an energy, it's heat, and that's what these cameras were recording, was picking up those things, and you could see these pockets where they, and it addresses what you were just saying. You can go into a pocket, an approach program where you just, that's not a big surface area. You put out some 545 in there, and it just brings back, some of the life in that soil.
Yeah, I think a lot like the PGMS has a best management protocols that talk about A lawns, B lawns, C lawns, D lawns, all those sort of thing, and really focusing your priorities. And we do that in golf in the greens, fairways, tees way, but we don't necessarily, you could dive it in further and say there's certain areas couple thousand square feet here, there, that really, whether it's a fairway or a rough or a tee or whatever, they take so much abuse. Like, and we can spot treat that.
You know, another one that
Inexpensively.
yeah.
I mean,
Make huge
a
differences.
huge impact for very little
There you
dollar.
go.
There's
That's
another
it.
area that I've gotten guys thinking about getting one step closer to their hero status with their clubs.
Right.
You know, the statistics on greens hit by the average tour player is 14.
Okay.
So take a 20 handicapper. How many greens does he hit?
I
Not
never hit the
14.
How about a 30? Yeah.
I've never hit a green in my life.
But my point to those turf managers is, you could be a real hero if you address the green surrounds,
Yeah.
There you go.
right?
Yeah.
That is a great point.
Yeah, that's a good one.
And
Yeah.
the bunker faces, same thing. I mean,
And
you
the
know,
and the
there's
challenge
lots
with
of ways to fix those.
the
things.
challenge with irrigating sand-based systems next to native soil systems is always a tough one. We can kind of balance some of that out as well.
Yeah, and it works. It makes
Yeah.
perfect sense. So what's Texas been like this year, other than bloody hot during the summer months?
Brutally hot.
Yeah.
I just looked it up before we got on here because I figured you'd ask, and I'll probably screw it up. We had the third hottest summer on record and the fourth driest record.
Wow.
Summer, and September was the hottest September ever recorded
In Texas.
in Texas.
Yeah.
In Dallas specifically.
Yeah.
Yeah.
A lot of
North-
concrete going
yeah.
on down in Dallas now, isn't
Yeah,
there?
it was a rough
I
summer.
mean, it's amazing when you don't cover crop. I mean, that's again. I mean, if you guys have any pushback from your community or members, you're a cover crop, man. You're the best sequesters of carbon in the world.
A
really.
lot of that cooling factor that happens too with green space is about the respiration.
Yeah.
You know, like so you're releasing oxygen. You know, and the plant's respiring. So like you get these cooling zones around green space because
especially if you have humus. Thatch, not so cooling, but
well,
but
you
humus.
need yes.
You have it holds and manages that
Moisture.
moisture,
You
so
need
the
moisture.
respiration starts to really happen.
Yeah. Transpirative cooling or evaporative cooling doesn't happen without something to evaporate.
Right,
Without
there has
some
to be
moisture
something there.
Right.
And sand greens obviously are inherently weak in that regard.
Right. They'll have it for a moment, but
Yeah.
but they're not going to hold on to
Yeah.
it for 40 days between
Yeah.
rains.
I mean, it's one of the things I hear a lot is that once these guys get their sand greens going, they're not running out at 3 o'clock pulling hoses as much, except for if you're in Texas and it's
Growing big
130
grass.
degrees,
Yeah.
all summer long.
105.
What's the Pacific Northwest been
Pacific
like?
Northwest, we had a pretty good summer.
Yeah.
Relatively
Heard that a
normal.
lot recently. out there.
My Arizona, Southern Cal clients had similar experiences to what Kirk did in Texas, but the PNW had a very, very difficult year the prior year.
I remember. Didn't you have that crazy
Long, long snow cover, very slow to come out, and then it got hotter than the face of the sun, and
Right.
not good. So this was a good break for a lot of the guys. They had a very
Yeah.
normal precipitation and temperature year, which they
Thank
deserved
goodness.
it.
Yeah, thank goodness.
They earned that.
They deserve, they earned it
yeah.
for
They
sure.
earned it, exactly. East Coast?
I'd say it's drought or deluge. Like that's
Seems
kind
that,
of the
doesn't it?
new trend. Like you're either dealing with a 40-day stretch or a 30-day stretch with not an inch of rain or not a drop of rain, or you're getting hit with 3-4 inch storms.
Yeah, we had
once
one of
a
those
week.
2 days ago.
Yes.
It's funny. I remember. I think I talked to you. We had a 2 or 3 day rain event that was just this beautiful, light little rain, and I was like, and we needed it.
Yes.
And it was like, oh my God, this is lovely. This
Yes.
is wonderful, because now you hear the forecast of rain, and it's like, oh my God, I mean, the town that we're sitting in got horribly flooded in Ida, and that's what we're seeing. We're seeing, look at what happened down in Florida with the hurricanes and everything just getting hammered and gone. But here in the Northeast, it, like you said, it's downpours and downpours of rain, and that nice steady rain that we remember as kids. Beautiful rain. You go sit on the porch and watch it come down. Can't do that anymore because these rainstorms are coming in at 3 or 4 inches. And it's just nuts.
My drive in on Sunday, I swear we had
Yeah,
more rain on that drive than I've had in 6
there you
months.
go.
It's
It was
crazy.
That was a 3-incher.
That was a
Crazy.
3-inch rainstorm on one day, and it was horrible. It was just nuts, and we've had a lot of those kind of crazy things. So what other trends are we seeing? What else can we talk about here in the few minutes that we got left?
Yeah, what else can we impart on the listener for moving into 2024 in the EarthWorks world or in the biological soil management world? Well, we've got some new stuff.
We're playing with some new stuff.
Yeah, we're playing with some new stuff. So there'll be a lot to talk about there. Let's see, what else? I mean, we brought up the whole carbon sequestration thing. I want to keep that conversation up, because I think, and we've got a roadmap to do that. We've got a contact to talk to.
You know, and there's so much science behind it. I mean, you know, when you have that conversation, you get fearful that it's going to become political, and it's not political at all. It's absolute science, and you can see it when you start to, you know, I mean, look at Kiss the Ground, the movie,
right?
And you know, and there he is standing on his farm, and the guy right next to him is standing, you know, he's got a desert for a farm.
I'm seeing
he's
the
bright
culture kind of catch up with us, honestly.
But I was just going to say
that
the ironic thing is, the solution is not a difficult one, and it's being applied in several instances.
I'm starting to see it catch up,
from some pretty strange places.
Yeah,
I mean, some pretty,
I think I was telling Jack last night that two of the fellows that are on the soil conservation board with me are both in their 60s, generational farmers on the same piece of ground, and they made a decision within the last 10 years that they've got to do something different. My grandfather farmed it this way. My father taught me to farm it this way, conventional agriculture. They've both gone to regenerative practices.
They can't afford not to change.
They can't afford not to change, but they would rather die than go back.
And I think there was a follow-up question that wasn't mine, but it was smart. I think it was Joel's. That makes sense.
It wasn't smart then.
Okay. But the question was, what?
Actually,
So,
sorry.
So the question was, what was the hardest part for them to make that change?
Just shifting mentality.
And
the risk of the unknown.
Not inputting. That first time when you didn't put out the urea.
I think my answer was keeping their foot off the gas for a season to see
just can't help yourself.
It's hard, and change is not fun for a lot of people.
And in Kiss the Ground, and the new movie Common Ground, Gabe Brown, who was a good friend of Jerry's, it was a necessity. Their farm had been devastated by hail 2 or 3 years in a row, and they were this close to going bankrupt. They didn't have the bank wasn't going to give him any money,
right.
So he had no choice to go. This goes back 15 years ago more, but he had no choice but to try to find something different. And it's a slow process. I mean, we don't change soils overnight, but we can start to see the reaction fairly quickly. This is a question we get a lot. How long is it going to take me to see anything? Well, you're going to see stuff immediately, but you're going to see the real changes. And when we see that, and we had a couple really high-end superintendents at Harbortown talking to us, and these guys are the best of the best in this industry, and they're and unsolicited, they're just coming out and saying, I there's no question I see these changes happening.
It makes the job easier.
To it. You have to be committed.
You have to see it.
And
you have to do it.
Kind of like what we talked about today from a business standpoint. We talked a lot about strategy in the next 3 to 5 years and what's the plan, and we have to stick to this plan, and we have the roadmap, but the same thing can be applied to agronomy.
Yeah.
Like you don't just dip your toe in the water and then pull it back out and oh well, that didn't work. Right.
I don't toot my horn about my superintendent career very often, but one thing I'm very proud of is that in my tenure I had, between assistants and interns, I had 47 people I had the opportunity to touch in their careers.
To influence.
And the one thing, if you asked any of them, I think they would remember this, that my philosophy was, going forward, nothing good happens fast, but a whole lot of bad things can. So, one step at a time and measure, see if it's making a difference. Nothing good happens fast.
Nothing good happens.
There is no truer statement in turf management than that.
All right, so here's a question, and unfortunately, Kirk, you can't be on this round because it's a podcast question. Your favorite podcast that you recorded this year?
Oof.
I know.
An avid listener.
Boy, that's a
subscriber.
good question.
You've had some great ones.
I've had some really fun ones. One of the more interesting ones, you might be surprised that I say this, but Colin Engstrom with Yard Garden Bozeman, fascinating
We were
guy.
talking about him, yeah.
Really fascinating guy, and just an out-of-the-box thinker because he didn't grow up in or didn't learn the way to manage turf.
Right.
He came out of the finance world, and so he applied. It's not how my brain works. So to listen to that, of course, anytime we can get guys like Dave Wilbur or Armin Suni on, you're always learning.
Have we had
something.
them on this year?
I don't.
We've kind of been
I
dissing
think
them a
Dave
little
and
bit.
I
We gotta
have
get
been
Dave
on
back.
once.
You were okay, yeah.
We were,
and those are the two biggest,
Yeah.
watched podcasts. in
we've
our
actually got one.
portfolio.
Kevin Ross and Dave and I are going to get on together and just
That's gonna be fun.
talk.
Anytime Dave's
Talk
on,
turf.
that's good. Yeah, all right.
My favorite
Favorite podcast?
I recorded one that comes to me that I'm very proud of it because it was a long time coming. Was sitting down with Dan Patrick and James Sirico at North Jersey Country Club because they just did this big Walter Travis
In the clubhouse.
In the clubhouse.
Yeah,
it was cool.
It was cool, and it was also three-way conversation. Right now we're having four-way. It makes it's cool. It makes a
Right,
whole
right.
nice kind of different vibe. So I really like that. But I have fun with all of
Yeah,
all of
it is a lot of fun.
Good time.
It is, and it's so funny because
Very
everybody
diplomatic of you.
Yeah.
I do. I
Well,
do.
you look like you're having fun,
Oh,
which
I
is
am.
always good.
Oh,
Yeah.
am I ever not?
Yeah, no, exactly. Go if you haven't seen, by the way, the EarthWorks for Home has a whole new podcast or a whole new website, and Jack and I have been doing the videos on there, and some of those have been nothing but fun, and they're all ad lib shticks, and
Yes.
and he's a goofball, which is always
as
fun.
are you.
Yeah. Well, I'm your straight
You're a
man.
good straight
on
man, yeah.
on half of these things, but you always have me laughing. It reminds me of the old Carol Burnett show when they used to always laugh, in the middle of their
they're
skit because they
breaking.
couldn't hold it back.
Tim
but,
Conway gets
Tim
Harvey Corbin going.
Oh my
and
God!
make it-
And Conway was the best of that
Oh, my
shtick because he would
gosh.
just get everybody to
So
laughing,
great.
which was really funny. I did a lot this year too, and I just love doing the Lawrence Mayhew podcast because it's just so informative, and everybody goes, "Oh my God, I love that." I only got about 10% of it. But,
Those ones
and
we did in
and they
the
go back.
office.
Oh, the
were
ones we
great.
did. Oh,
They
those
were,
were the ones the three of us,
and
were,
that was three of us again. Yeah.
Yeah, that was
Look
really.
for more of that.
We're gonna try to get Lawrence on. We definitely want to get Dave on.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of people. I mean, anybody that knows, one of my favorite was Kevin Priceski, who was an old friend from way back in the day, and I've been bugging him to get on, and I love that podcast. And a couple of his assistants had called me and said, "You got to get Kevin on." And now, of course, he's retiring. I think I'm having dinner with him next week. But he's retiring.
microphone.
He's done. But that was a lot of
Bring
fun.
the gear.
And and of course I always bring out the embarrassing stories that we have. And Kevin is great. He's just a great sport, and we had a lot of fun.
You
with
did
it.
say thousands of listens of the podcast. I want to
Thousands.
clarify: 200 plus thousand listens.
That's a lot more than thousands.
Yeah,
isn't it?
so 200 plus
Yeah.
thousand listens. So thank you to everybody. Thank
Yeah,
you
and
to the
it's
listeners.
it's 3 years in the can now, and we've repeated once. Maybe or we've done a couple best ofs.
Right.
Next
We'll mash
week.
up a couple
Next week,
weeks
I think
ago.
we're going to take a break during the holiday, but we'll probably rerun a podcast from one of the favorite ones, just to have something out there. Guys, like what's going on this week? I mean, it's kind of cool getting the feedback, and young guys and older guys. So it's been a lot of fun.
You guys are celebrities.
We're
Oh,
celebrities.
come on.
Yeah, I can barely go outside.
Say it
without
again.
having
Wait,
to-
hold on.
Hold up.
It's hard,
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm
You
so
guys are
tired of signing my autograph. Oh, that's right. That's on a check. Never mind. Anyway, folks, thank you so much for joining us. Thank you so much for the years of support. This is the best team in the industry, and I'm very grateful that we've had such a strong family effect here. And thank you for listening. Have a wonderful holiday. If you haven't subscribed to the EarthWorks podcast, please do. You get to hear these guys on a regular basis, and then sometimes even me. If we can ever convince Kirk to get on there, maybe one day, right?
There you
I'm
go.
here
You're on
right
today,
now.
bro.
I'm on today.
You're
he's on.
today. It's
Yeah,
all
hosting
good.
all by
Don't
yourself.
hold your breath,
It's too
folks.
good. Why would I mess up?
Yeah.
It's such a good thing.
You got a great
You
record.
guys
Great
just
track record.
totally got
Well,
this thing handled.
I just learned today that you could screw something up real fast, but it takes a long.
It takes a long time to fix things, but you can screw it up in a
That's right.
second.
Kevin taught me that.
That's right.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. Say goodbye, everybody.
Okay,
Thanks,
goodbye,
y'all.
everybody.
Thanks, y'all. Happy holidays.